minutes after 6. We can go ahead and get started. We're awaiting the arrival of one of our aldermen, but she's on her way. Deputy Clerk Schulteis, would you read the preamble for us, please?
Thank you. In accordance with the applicable statutes of the State of Illinois and the ordinance of the City of Prospect Heights, notice is hereby given that the City Council meeting of the Mayor and the City Council of the City of Prospect Heights is being held on Monday, March 13, 2023, at 6 o'clock p.m. in person at the City Council Chambers, Prospect Heights City Hall, 8 North Elmhurst Road, Prospect Heights, Illinois, and simulcast on Zoom. Acting Mayor Matthew Dolick presiding. This meeting will be broadcast live on cable channels Comcast and Astound RCN Channel 17 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. It will also be recorded and televised on Comcast and Astound RCN Channel 17 and AT&T UVerse 99. Attendees who wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items will be provided an opportunity during the meeting. There's a 5-minute time limit for speakers.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting today, Monday, March 13th, 2023, at 6:04 p.m., being held in the Prospect Heights City Hall Council Chambers at 8 North Elmhurst Road. At this time, could I have a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
Yes. Alderman Ludvigson.
Here.
Alderman Cameron.
Here.
Alderman Dolick.
Here.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
I just heard from Alderman Morgan Adams. She is on her way. She'll be just a couple of minutes late.
And Alderman Dash.
Here.
All right, we do have a quorum. Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? All right, the first order of business is the approval of minutes. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of February 27th, 2023? Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any corrections? There being none, could I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Dash.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Ludvigson.
Aye.
Alderman Cameron.
I'm sorry.
Alderman Cameron.
Oh, aye. Sorry, I didn't hear you, Joanna.
All right, motion passes 4-0. And I would like to just note for the record that Alderman Morgan Adams just arrived for the meeting at 6:06. So we do have all 5 council members here. At this time, this is a budget meeting, and we do have presentations for that, but discussing this with Joe, we're going to change the order of the agenda so that people are not wading through all of the presentations. So we're going to push item 4 to the end of the meeting. So I'm going to skip to item 5, appointments and confirmations. We do have this evening the appointment of John Mashevsky as the Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals Commissioner. I believe his resume was in the packet. Director Peterson, if you want to give some background on this person.
Thank you, Mayor Dolick, City Council. I received Mr. Machevsky's application this winter, and we finally had an opportunity to meet last month. John works for Commonwealth Edison in their land acquisitions division. He's very familiar with property and boundaries and business applications. He also, at a previous municipality where he lived, served on their plan commission in Lamont. So he has a lot of experience. He's fairly new to the city. However, he wants to get involved and has the time to get involved. Very comfortable with Mr. Mashevsky, and this is coming forward as ZBA member John Taman has informed us he will not be seeking reappointment. So we had an opening coming up here in May.
All
Thank
right,
you
very
very
good. Could I begin with a motion to approve?
So moved, Morgan Adams.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments or questions regarding this appointment? There being none, could I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Ludvixson.
Aye.
Alderman Dash.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Next item is public comment on agenda matters. Is there anyone that is registered, or does anyone wish to speak?
I don't have anyone registered, Mayor.
All right, thank you. There is no consent agenda. Moving on to item 8, old business. Item 8A is a liquor license request and ordinance increasing the number of C3 liquor licenses from 3 to 4, which is Monday through Thursday and Sunday from 8 a.m. to 12 midnight, and Friday and Saturday from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. for Excellence Cafe at 1279 North Rand Road. This is the second reading. We discussed this last week. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments regarding this?
No, I didn't ask this, I guess she's not here today, am I correct?
I don't see her here this evening. She was here last week and answered a few questions for us.
Okay.
Did you have any other comments?
No, not really, I just, I mean, we didn't ask her, of course, she may not know what her anticipations are for the future in terms of the hours she's going to be open, so I guess that's probably, you know, subject, or it's not something we can ask her at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't ask her, but the approval of this license would allow her to choose those hours
Correct.
of operation that,
Right.
that coincide with the license. Are there any other questions? There being none, could I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Ludvixson.
Aye.
Alderman Dash.
Aye.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. And item 9, new business. Item 9A is a liquor license request and ordinance increasing the number of Class A liquor licenses from 8 to 9, which is Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m., Friday and Saturday from 8 a.m. to 3 a.m., and Sunday from 12 noon to 2 a.m. This is for Bar Salado at 1421 North Rand Road. This is a first reading only, so it's open at this time for discussion. I don't believe we have anyone here from the location, but...
He's on the line.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have the person on the line. Does anyone have any questions for the owner?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What are your business hours going to be?
Right now, we're looking at probably, you know, all things being equal with labor force and everything like that, will probably end up being weekdays. We'll probably open 4 o'clock till 10 o'clock. And then weekends, we will go Saturday 11 till probably 1 a.m. and then Sunday 11 a.m. till 10 p.m.
All right. Are there any other questions? Go ahead.
So I'm just questioning whether the Class A liquor license is actually the most appropriate for that?
That's what we were looking at, and we're still looking at, you know, logistically how we're going to roll out. Originally, that's our hours of operation. Whether we decide to adjust after that is kind of why we took the 8 liquor license.
Are you looking for video gambling?
We have not.
You anticipate that?
We do not at this time, no.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions regarding this item? I don't have the list in front of me. Are there, it seems like this would be an appropriate class of liquor license. Joe or Dan, is there something else that would be more in line?
I believe Mr. Rogowskis, you might remember, he came to a council meeting, gosh, some time ago. I believe this is the one that comes closest,
Okay.
because it also has full alcohol sales. As you recall, this is the restaurant that's interested in East Coast and Brooklyn-style craft pizzas. Karen, you've had discussions with Mr. Rogowskis. Is that correct, that this was the closest license to?
This is the one they had initially asked for, and this was the closest and allowed them all the liquor, and they weren't sure about the times, as Mr. Rogowskis just said, if they were going to be opening later at some point.
Okay,
Yeah,
very good.
I'm looking at the A1. So that one only goes from 12 noon to midnight, Monday through Thursday, and Friday, Saturday from noon to midnight, and doesn't have Sunday, so,
But he was talking about Saturday being open until 1 AM.
right, so that's why, that may be correct, that there is, I thought there was another one, but I've got the chart right here in front of me.
What does Lola's have?
An A license. No, I'm sorry, they have a C license.
Yeah, that's a beer and wine license.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Lola serves
Full-
beer and wine.
Yes, they serve everything, yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, the A1, I believe, was the Ramada bowling alley license. So there, as you can see, there's no one that currently has that license. That's one of the ones that I would hope that we would be able to clean up if we're redoing the liquor license.
Okay.
And as far as if Barcelona looking for a full liquor license, pretty much the A or the C license are their most restrictive options, and those still go to 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning on the weekends.
And at the time, they were looking to replicate what Nico's had, and that was the restaurant before them.
But I think did Nico sell anything but beer and wine? I think they sell beer and wine, but that was it, wasn't it?
A C license?
Yeah,
Yeah, C should be beer and wine.
right, that was what Nico's had, I thought.
What does Lola's have, though? I'm curious.
A C is a full liquor, and then you go into your C1s and C3s, which are the beer and wine.
Okay.
Do you know
Again,
what Lola's have?
C, yeah, Lola says a C, so they're.
Right now,
full-
they have a C.
Lola's has a C, which is a
Yes.
full liquor license.
Right. What is the difference between the C and the A? I mean, they have
So it
the
looks
same
like
hours.
the difference I have, let's see.
It's going to be seating, probably,
What?
the difference between C and A. Again, this is another reason we need to look at our liquor code.
Yeah, because I'm looking at A, and it looks Monday through Thursday, 8 AM to 2 AM is Monday through Thursday, Friday, 8 AM to 3 AM on Friday, and 8 AM to 3 AM on Sunday. So it looks like it's the same. I'm not seeing a difference on the C license and the A license. Am I wrong, Peter? So I'm
No,
looking-
for hours of operation, you are absolutely correct. The
You think-
difference I'm going to say, and I do not want to misspeak, it's going to be probably the amount of, the C liquor license is like probably be a restaurant liquor license that has a certain number of seats that are required. But going in any further than that, I'm afraid I don't want to misspeak. But you are absolutely correct. The hours for operation are exactly the same for the Class C and the Class A.
So maybe we should think about doing a category for a liquor license that would not go to 3 AM, but maybe go to 1 AM on some of these days?
Well, Alderman Morgan Adams, I would say similar to what we just did for the restaurant we just approved, which is midnight during the week and 1 AM on the weekends. If they're not going to be open that long, we can create that category,
Yeah.
which is what we should do instead of
Right.
always issuing a license 4 hours beyond what people are open.
Right.
So I think that, are you opposed, what was his name?
Thomas,
Thomas, are you opposed to that, midnight, 1 AM?
Bless you.
Thomas?
Right now, that was the license that was recommended to me by the village to attain. And like I said, you know, a lot of restaurants' hours are controlled by labor force right now. So if that changes, you know, I would like to have at least the opportunity to, you know, have those hours available if they are.
So you're saying you're going to eventually go to 3 AM? You're going to be open?
No, I don't think we would ever go to 3 AM.
Okay.
I just don't, you know, I think 1 AM, I'd have to see the difference because I haven't read through the other license after this one was recommended to me, so this one seemed to have fit. So I'd have to see what that is, but yeah, right now, we're, 1 AM is all we would go to, as we roll out.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Go ahead.
So I'm looking at the liquor licenses that we have available, and I don't see a liquor license that goes beyond 12 midnight, other than the C and the A, which are the same. I don't see one that goes to 1 AM on weekends. Am I missing something, Alderman Ludwigson?
Actually, Director Peterson, you had something to add?
Thank you, Mayor. When the council first approved the original restaurant that was going to go there, the Park Local for Mr. Brizzolero, he was going for the A, and that was right at the time of COVID when that got approved and it never went through. Subsequently, it was reissued to someone else, and the purpose for that longer license, now in talking with Mr. Roguskas and Mr. Brizzolero over the last year, was it gave them the opportunity as we came out of the COVID situation that should the business demands allow them, they would have some flexibility to expand the hours in the business instead of finding they have a clientele and not being able to do it was part of the discussion. Granted, it's been over a couple of months since we've had that last discussion, but that was one of the rationales for recommendation of the A license.
Okay. So it seems to, before we get too deep into this, it seems like the licenses that are available right now, this would be the most appropriate until we review the entire liquor licenses and create something new. What we have right now, it seems like this would be the most appropriate. Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah, it looks like that.
Because I don't want to get into a debate on creating new licenses at this meeting.
No, you're correct, Mayor, and I think, but we should in the future look at creating a new
Yeah,
class.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And this has been an issue that Alderman Ludwigson has talked about revamping that, and we can get that into that at a future date, but for right now. And again, this is only for a first reading at this point anyway, but does anyone have any other questions regarding this item? Okay, item 9B, on a related note, this is again for Bar Salado, 1421 North Rand Road, is requesting a Sunday brunch addendum, allowing Sundays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon to be granted by the City Liquor Commissioner upon approval of their Class A liquor license request. And this is, on a personal thought, it seems like kind of an antiquated item here where we don't allow alcohol sales before a certain hour on Sundays, but there are many that want to have a Sunday brunch, so this would be an addendum to that original request. So again, this is for discussion only. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding that?
So my only question is, Tom, what time are you going to open on Sunday? Sir, Thomas?
Sorry, I had to get my mic back up. Yep, I had to get my mic back on. I apologize.
Sure.
Yeah, right now on Sunday, we're looking at 11 a.m. open. We definitely want to have, you know, some good brunch specials going on Sunday. And then if we adjust from there, but right now we're at 11 a.m. open on Sunday.
So are you serving breakfast or you're just serving lunch?
No, we have some creative menu ideas that we have. We'll have some breakfast style pizzas. We're looking at, you know, some really good Bloody Mary options, things of that nature.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
When do we think they're going to open?
Thomas, when do you think you're going to be opening?
I just got my latest updated schedule from Bear Construction, and that puts us right at about the end of June. We've had some big lead times on some big ticket items that have really set us back. Some doors and windows and stuff like that have been anywhere from 13 to 16 weeks out on delivery, so we've been going through that process, which has been a struggle, but right now I think we're really starting to button up and starting to coast. So I'm really pushing for that end of summer, right around there.
All right, thank you. Very good. Any other questions?
No.
All right, again, there's no action requested tonight at this meeting. Moving on, item 9C is a staff memo and resolution authorizing an agreement with Tesca Associates to perform a zoning code audit and evaluation. Can I start with a motion to approve?
So move.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Joe or Dan, would you like to expand on this?
I'll defer to Dan. This is something that he introduced at the strategic planning meeting in January. And I believe it was well received by the council as far as a needed update from the city. And Dan, if you could please go over the scope of work and what, it's a two-phase process, but I think it will really bring us up, our zoning code up to contemporary times.
Thank you very much, Joe and council. As we discussed at the strategic planning session, as the town is built out now and we are now into redevelopment of lots versus building new vacant space to develop, in the age of our code now, dating back to the mid-'70s, though it's not old relatively in municipal government standards, it is, for us, back to when we started the basis. In talking to one of our approved consultants regarding this project and going through, talking to a couple other zoning officials, Tesca Associates had recommended doing a two-phase approach, an audit and evaluation of our current stuff, looking at specific areas that need the most attention to make sure that we're up with best practices and current standards. You know, we've heard for a number of years now with applicants that the Uber ride share and the DoorDash and the deliveries has had an impact. We've seen an impact on parking requirements for large shopping centers. The days of the 6 per thousand or the 10 per thousand square footage car ratios may not be appropriate. So their recommendation is to take a two-part approach, an audit and evaluation. Therefore, we're not revamping 100% of the code. We'll look at those items that are, need to be addressed, the stuff that's good and the bad. Then that is the first phase that will involve them reaching out to the PZBA members to talk to them about the experience, talking to the policymakers, to the council, and also meeting with key stakeholders, business owners, some of our local property owners, to get a feeling of how the code works for them. After that, a report will be made to the PZBA and council with some recommendations on where the code should be changed. Phase 2 then would be the rewrite phase. And so tonight what I'm asking for, recommending, is that we go with Tesca Associates, who's one of the pre-approved planning consultants for the city, for a not to exceed $10,000 audit and evaluation of our zoning code. And this year, I had some money budgeted for a couple large projects that did not come to fruition. I do have the expenditures to start the project in this current year's budget, and then I've planned for phase 2 in the upcoming budget. So we would look to be getting started on this project in April with council's direction approval tonight.
All right, thank you. Any questions on this for Dan? Go ahead.
Dan, will they be making suggestions or changing things inside the code that we have to update to make it a little easier, like fees and schedules and stuff like that, so that those are in one place? Or are they really just going to just say, you don't need that many parking spots for this use, or you need to change that? Are they purely looking at the building part of it, or are they looking at the whole entire thing?
They'll be evaluating and going through the whole code, looking at those content areas of the code that, in their opinion, would need, and also finding out from the stakeholders and the different people involved, what should be addressed first. In my opinion, nothing is off limits on this one. But the thing is there are still a lot of good things in our code, okay? And we don't need to spend time on those if it's not necessary. So that's what a big part of the first phase is delineating what are the areas that really need the most attention first, what can be left alone, and then recommending processes to clean up the other side, other parts of it.
But the structure will stay the same?
It may not.
Because it's kind of hard, sometimes it's hard to find things in our code if you don't know that the liquor licenses are within a certain part of the code. You're racking your brain trying to remember where it's at in there. And
Try and find the code requirement for fences in the zoning code. It's in lot coverage.
Right,
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
Okay,
You're gonna
Right.
those types of things may be some outcomes and recommendations. Is we may be looking at a code at the end of the time next year, at the end of next year when this project finishes, of a code that it's got the same content, but may not look
Right.
how we're used to it today.
Okay.
So they're going to reorganize and restructure the whole thing.
We don't know that.
We don't know that. They may-
That may be a recommendation that comes out of this audit and evaluation on where this would go to benefit and how would this work the best to achieve the goals that we want to achieve, which is making it understandable, making it more user-friendly, and not to lessen the quality of life issues, but not to put unnecessary roadblocks or hindrances in the zoning process.
Okay, because you have some parts that really need to be updated. Exactly, to put it lightly.
You know, let's talk about, just an example is Prospect Crossing, our largest shopping center in town. We've got almost 7 parking spaces per 1,000 square foot of retail space in there. That is, you know, that's high considering from other towns I went to, but that's what was determined.
Right.
Now, if we can lessen that, does that create opportunities for redevelopment or new development?
Got it.
So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Dan? There being none, could I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Ludwigson,
Is the roll call is the approval of the resolution or the agreement?
The
It's
rest
the
Resolution.
agreement with
Resolution.
Tesca.
Okay. Okay, aye.
Alderman Cameron,
Aye.
Alderman Dolick,
Aye.
Alderman Morgan Adams,
Aye.
Alderman Dash.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Excuse me, Mayor, one quick
Yes.
second. Mr. Mashewski showed up. He had on his calendar, by my mistake, 6:30, so John did show up. And I'd like to introduce him. John, if you'd just like to stand up. They already took action because we started at 6. So you're appointed.
So you have been
I was
approved.
hoping I didn't come at the wrong, I looked at the flowers,
So.
6:30.
Yeah. So that was my mistake. So Mayor Dolick, John Mashewski. and
Pleasure to
council.
meet you and welcome. You were approved this evening for joining the board, so welcome and congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you for being here this evening. All right, thank you, Dan.
welcome.
Real quick, are there any elected officials that have a report they wish to give this evening? Are there any staff members who have a report? There being none,
I have
I'd
none.
like to, at this time, go back to item 4, the presentations for our budget. And Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, I'm sorry. Joanna? Did you have a
Yeah, I
report?
just had a real quick announcement.
please,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Billy
I'm
didn't
sorry.
hear. No, that's all right. Our school district and our surrounding community school districts are having a hiring of all educators. They're on a real frenzy. They're really looking for educators, some real flexible contracts. So if anyone knows any educators that are looking for work, Please reach out to the districts. And it's ongoing, and they've announced it for at least a couple of weeks now. They're really begging for educators. So please pass the word on. And that's all I really wanted to add tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other reports? All right, again, at this time, I'd like to return back to the presentations, and Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce each of these this evening.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to start off and thank particularly our finance team, Sherry, Nate, and Bob. They start working on this, putting schedules together, probably about December, and it's really, they work through it in the winter. A number of things, revenue projections, looking at our different funds, water funds, sewer funds, pensions, all of those things. They're also greatly assisted by our department directors, who also build the budgets within their departments. It's really a collective effort, and I can't say it enough about them. They've done a fabulous job. We are very pleased with the budget that's presented to you. I think, as you can see, and Sherry's going to go into more detail on this, but at least as far as on the revenue side, we're on the upswing coming out of the period of COVID, which had a significant impact on us, particularly our hotel motel revenues and operations. But we're looking this year, hotel motel will do much better than they had going through COVID. For capital projects, we're pleased that for the coming year, we have plans for getting the Wolf Road sidewalk under construction. People sometimes ask, why do these things take so long? And there are obviously people that haven't worked on those things. To get a project like Wolf Road sidewalk together, we have 5 different funding sources for that. Over time, we've made applications. At one time, we were rejected. Doesn't always go our way, but you put those funding sources together. It's a highly funded project. It has, from Representative Schneider, represented us for a federal community projects funding of $1.1 million. We've also obtained grants from the Regional Transportation Authority, access to transit, which then qualified us for congestion mitigation and air quality grants. We also have Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program, and from Invest in Cook, sponsored by Commissioner Britton, we also had engineering money. So that's how a project takes many years, unless you want to pay for it completely out of your own fund. Then you can do it much quicker, and I doubt that the city of Prospect Heights is going to be able to do that. Willow Road Flood Control Project, that's also something that's been on the shelf for many years. That's moving forward. We're scheduled for bidding this summer, and that project will raise the elevation of Willow Road 4 feet to address chronic flooding problems. We have had years where Willow Road has been closed to traffic for, 10, 12 or more days. Obviously, that's a connector street within that neighborhood, so there's great concerns about public safety, fire, emergency medical service access, police access, and so forth. The East Side Stormwater Management Improvement, we recently obtained a grant, a community projects grant for $2.4 million, sponsored by Representative Schakowsky. We need to come up with a match for that of approximately $800,000. It's a significant project that's going to address some long-term flooding problems on the east side. And money has been made available within this budget for our share of the match. There are going to be a few areas coming along on tonight, as well as our next meeting of council. We'll ask council consideration, decision-making. Police pension funding, that we are recommending, Finance Administration recommending funding level of $1.29 million. There's a scale of you can go to a minimum amount or what is recommended by the pension fund. We're between those points. Solid waste funding, the Solid Waste Agency in Northern Cook County, the transfer station, if you've ever been to it, over near Central and River Roads. It's a massive building, and it's served all of our communities well. I think there's 16 Swain communities. The roof is 30 years old, needs a new roof. So we'll be coming to the council at the next meeting, talk about what we're recommending is a surcharge roughly about for 2 years. I think their analysis of the charge to Prospect Heights is about $110,000. A surcharge of $1 per bill to bill payers for 24 months will meet that surcharge. People had asked, well, why didn't you fund this before? Well, that's always the dilemma of how much do you fund. You charge people previously for funding, but at any rate, it's going to cost what it costs. Other water rates, we'll talk about that the next meeting. There's an increase from Illinois, primarily a pass-through increase from Illinois American Water of about, I think it's about 3.8%. There's nothing we can do about that. That's contractual. So those are some of the key isolated areas. Most of the budget that comes to the operating departments, Public Works, Police, Community Development, it's static. There's not a lot of change. So there's a couple new initiatives. Dan had mentioned the review of the zoning code. In police, we've got a DACRA, Police Information Management Systems, which will be very helpful. But really, it's a pretty static budget. We're very proud of it. And at that, I'll turn it over to Sherry to kind of set this up for us and go through, starting off with the revenues. Tonight, we'll cover revenues, and we'll cover the operating departments as well as capital improvements, and special funds will be at the meeting on March 27th.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks. Welcome, everybody, Mayor, members of City Council, management, staff, residents. This is the kickoff of our first budget workshop of 2. So I'll pass the slide along. There we go. As far as an agenda goes, we have our 2 meetings. All the operating departments and the general fund we'll deal with and talk about today. Capital improvement plan we'll talk about just generally, and we will have specific numbers and projects and details ready for the next meeting along with other funds. We're going to talk about a couple of strategic considerations, fund balance projections, and then we'll go into some details about the revenue and expense from fiscal 23 and then move into fiscal 24. We'll review our debt service going forward, and then each of our departments will have an opportunity to present their individual budgets, and any questions that come along, we're all happy to answer. As Joe has reviewed already, our major strategic financial considerations are the same as last year, really. We have our capital projects, we have our police pension fund contribution, and our debt service. Capital projects-wise, we're going to end the year of fiscal 23 at about $2.5 million of fund balance, and we're looking at a budget next year of a total $5 million in revenue. That is a successful grant initiative. $4 million of that $5 million has already been awarded to us, grant funded. Joe talked about the major projects. We have the Willow Road Drainage Project coming and Wolf Road North and South sidewalks. So we have a $5 million revenue budget in the capital fund. The other $1 million, we are budgeting a transfer from general fund of $1 million to help with the costs of our local share. At the end of 24, we're expecting to have about $1 million ending fund balance. So we want to just always be aware that in order to be project ready or shovel ready, as we had called it in the past, we are really needing to make a contribution from inter funds or continued with our successful grant awards and any other funding sources that we can find. The police pension fund contribution this year is about 1.2. As Joe had mentioned, the range that we've gotten for the required and the recommended is between $760,000 required and $1.4 million recommended. As always, we try to contribute a high percentage of that recommended if we can, and once we get to the details of that, you'll see that we are continuing to do so.
I have some questions about that, but you want me to wait till you get to that?
It's up to you, either.
Well, I mean, I know that, we've, our percentages in the past have been a lot lower, and, I know that it was commented that this is in between, but the required contribution of 760,000 compared to, well, no, I'm sorry, 747,299, and to the required contribution of, well, you've got the required contribution of 1,089,663. Is that correct, or is it the 1.2 million?
What page are you looking at?
I'm looking at page 16. It says year 23, then there's year 24.
For fiscal '23, that's the number, those are the numbers you're referring to?
Right.
So we funded, our budgeted contribution for last year was the $1,000,089. Our
Right.
annual contribution is made up of three components. You have the employee contributions, which are about 215, 220,000. Those are fixed based on calculations per person.
Right?
We have the property tax levy that's extended by Cook County, and then we also have the city's portion of the contribution.
So the property tax in Cook County is how much?
So we budgeted 556 last year, but once we got the extension, which was post-budget, it was only 420. So the
Okay.
$1,089 really is going to end up at the end of fiscal '23 about 975. This year, the budget between 760 and $1,004,000. Now that, of course, is up to council's decision and approval. Anywhere between that range is what we can do.
Right. I just think that you're talking about $1,290,000, right?
Yes.
And that seems awfully high, to be honest. I mean, it looks like we're doing better than most of the towns around us in terms of our contributions, and the likelihood of the extension for that fund is going to go through. So, again, it hasn't gone through yet, but, I mean, the point is, though, that I just think for our town, the size of our town and everything else, that contribution is just awfully high.
And that's why we are bringing it up for discussion. Of course, that can be adjusted as council decides.
Okay, thank you.
The breakdown of that budget is currently the property tax portion is $450. Our extension in 2021 was $420. The contributions from members does not fluctuate very significantly. It's about $220 maybe. And then the city's contribution portion will be $600 to make up that total number. So council, as part of that budget, is going to see $600, and that is, of course, up to you to consider and discuss and
Okay.
decide.
All right, thank you, because I just think it's awfully high.
Okay, the last piece to talk about, or at least keep in the back of our minds for some consideration, is our debt service. And we'll have specific numbers as we get through the presentation. The road bonds are scheduled to be paid off in December of '26, which is fiscal '27. We've talked about that already and what we're going to do in advance of that payoff happening. Funding for we're in the early stages of talking about another road program, so funding for that program will be needed, and so considerations of another bond referendum is on the table. The water fund debt is also going to be paid off soon. That will be paid off in December of '24, which will be fiscal '25. The water rate is made up of 4 components, one of them being a debt service component. $6 of our current water rate is provided in order to pay off debt service. The current calculation that is used, which includes that component of $6, we are hoping that council can give some consideration and review of that calculation. Once the debt service is paid off, the water rate is at risk for $6. So we would be asking some consideration to possibly recharacterize that piece of the water rate for future capital reserve, for replacements and repairs. So those are the big numbers that we came into for this year. As we want to go into fund balance projections in more detail, here is our projected results for the end of '23. If you'll look down probably the fourth column, net revenue and expense for '23, our general fund is going to have a plus 145,000. Motor fuel tax is going to be strong, 896. We did not budget any projects in the motor fuel tax fund this year, so their expenses were 0. Tourism did very well. You'll see their revenue at 532 against their expenses of 348. So they'll be increasing their fund balance by 184. DEA, this year we did not get significant revenue from our sharing funds yet. We're hoping that those funds start to roll in shortly, but we did have some expenditures. Solid waste came in at a negative 72. We did have a transfer to capital of 75,000, which is basically pretty much about that full amount, leaving an ending fund balance of 85,000. This year, with the increasing costs that we talked about, the transfer from solid waste to capital, it has been reduced to 40 instead of the 75. The next big fund to look at is our capital fund, whereby our fund balance is being reduced by 4.3 million. The major project there was the Arlington Countryside project. Some of the money collected for that project was collected in fiscal year '22, which is why we're seeing that significant negative number in '23. We got the Rebuild Illinois money, we got the ARPA money 2 years, so that's why it's not showing up in fiscal '23. We have road construction debt, SSAs, water, sewer. The police pension fund is going to end up at about a negative $1.6 million. The market, really, they took a hit with the market. 1.5 million as of December, I believe, was the cumulative loss for 2023 so far. If you move over to the second to the last column is the net of what we're budgeting for fiscal '24. We have the general fund coming in at a loss of 400,000. Included in that expense number is the $1 million transfer to capital. So we are going to move some of our fund balance over into capital as of for fiscal '24. And as we go down the line, similarly, the DEA seizure fund, again, no revenue is budgeted, and so that's showing a negative, awaiting some revenue to come in from our equitable sharing agreement. Our capital projects fund, the negative 1.7 million. As I said, we have about 5 million in revenue grants already awarded to us. The expenditures of 6.6. Joe mentioned the major projects coming in for that. We have the Wolf Road North and South sidewalk project, and then we have the Willow Road drainage project. Those are the two big projects that make up that 6.6. The net bottom line, $1.8 million. Again, that's pretty much majorly covered with the capital funding loss of 1.7 in that budget for this coming year. Okay, so we have our projected results for fiscal '23. Revenues, 10.2 million versus a budget of 9.3. 100% of budgeted revenue we expect for the end of fiscal '23. The biggest players and contributors to that is our income tax, vehicle stickers, licenses, building permits. All came in over budget and helped us attain that 110%. Expenditures, we have 10.0 million versus a budget of 9.3. Again, within that number, we'll present to council. Our audit just finished in the last couple, January, I believe. So the bottom line in our audit came in over 1.2 million. I can't remember the exact number. But within that 10 million of expenditures for fiscal '23, we'll bring to council a proposed transfer in '23 of another $1.2 million to go to capital. So that's why it's showing us overexpended. The unassigned fund balance at the end of '24, we analyze this every year to see what our position is as unrestricted fund balance in order to cover future operations. The big numbers within our fund balance are our committed reserves, as well as our committed for capital, committed for emergency, and then our unassigned fund balance. The committed reserve has always been $3 million, is jumping a little bit to 3.3. The reason for that is in the calculation, it's really based on future budgeted expenses. So as our expenses went up by the $1 million for the transfer to capital, the emergency reserve would just go up as well by 30%, just to cover that increase in expenditures. Capital Improvements Fund, we're committed $5 million, and then our unrestricted fund balance still remains 56%, which is a strong position for unrestricted fund balance at the end of the year, especially given the 30% reserve that we already have. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Now we're going to dig into some details on the general fund, so I'm going to turn it over to Bob to take over this part.
Thanks, Sherry. So after listening to what Sherry had to say, now we're going to get into the budget of where we're looking at for this year, for 23-24. An overview of the general fund revenues. We're looking at hopefully bringing in about $10,106,000 in revenue. Based on the conservative numbers, with uncertainties in the market right now and the world, we're budgeted a little conservative for those type of revenues. The major revenue sources that we do receive as a city is the income tax, sales tax, non-home rule, as you see on the bottom down there. And we're keeping those at a pretty flat for 23 into 24, keeping about the same amount that we budgeted in 23 and 20, going into 24. Then on the next slide here shows you a graph of how the city, where the city gets the revenues mostly from. 68% of the city's revenues come from local taxes, intergovernmental taxes. And these are, the local taxes are your places for eating, your handle tax, cannabis, video gaming taxes, non-home rule sales tax, utility taxes. I think it was said earlier by Joel that we were seeing a nice increase to our hotel and places for eating tax coming out of the pandemic, so there's been some nice recovery in those areas for local taxes. And then with intergovernmental taxes, we have the income and sales tax, which have been strong over the last couple of years. So the breakdown there just kind of shows how revenues are generated for the city. And then this other graph here showing just the major revenue sources between the years from 21 through 24, and where it sits for 24 compared to other years. If you notice that in 2022, you see a spike there in income tax and sales tax and the non-home rule tax. During that time, there was the income tax, the state income tax with the individual income tax and receipts were increased from 21 to 22, and that's why we're seeing a bigger spike. Also, corporate income tax. They had a strong corporate profits and changes to the corporate tax law, and also they're also making estimated payments to cover some of their taxes. That's why you see a spike in 22. But from 23 into 24, or even to 22, or 23 into 24, they've been pretty flat. So we're considering that the taxes here will stay about the same from 23. And that's what I have. Any questions regarding our revenue sources?
All right, thanks, Bob. So hopping into expenditures, the slide that you're seeing right now, we're looking at the 2023-2024 general fund expenditure overview. We have a proposed general fund expenditures of $10,509,000, which is about 4% increase from our projected 2023 expenditures. We picked out a couple of highlights out of these expenses. This year, we're having $50,000 for IT upgrades, and that includes the antivirus software and firewalls. Plus, we're going to be migrating to Office 365. Something that happened that's actually helping our expenses is the employer portion of the IMRF rate dropped from 11.23 to 7.33, which is bringing roughly $83,000 in savings throughout all the departments. And then going the other way, increases in health insurance it's gonna come at about $170,000 this year, and the police and pension fund contributions are, we're suggesting that an increase of $315,000, and Bob's gonna have a lot more detail on that during a later portion of the presentation. Next slide. The expenditure composition, as you can see here, this is letting us know which department's percentage makes up the entire budget, their percentage of, with public safety coming in at 53%, public works at 12%, and we have this other category at 16%. The thing you should take away from this graph is that about 80% of the city's proposed expenditures are coming for services and improvements to the city. So diving into that 16% a little bit more, that's made up of that $1.2 million transfer that Sherry was talking about earlier. And again, just to echo what she was saying, we're going to be bringing a resolution to the city council during the April meeting for consideration and approval for that. Next slide, please. This slide shows our expenditure trends. As you can see, expenditures are kind of showing the 7% of inflation rate that's being taken into consideration, with 2023 expenses being a little bit higher than the previous 21 through 23. Public safety expenses are higher due to wages, benefits, and pension contribution being taken into consideration, and Chief Caponegro will go into more detail during his presentation for that. Next slide, please. And this last slide is for expenses going through debt service and future payments. It illustrates that at the end of fiscal year 2025, the last principal and interest payment for the water funds is going to be around $78,900. And for the road bonds, we're looking at a fiscal year 27 of $1.3 million principal and interest. And again, that's it. Okay. So at this point, we've concluded the finance portion of this presentation. If anybody has any questions for me or any questions for Sherry or Bob, I'll gladly take them.
Well, one item that's different, I just want to call out, the council members has asked for, is you've also done a multi-year exercise. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
So what we've done is that we've taken a look at our revenues and expenditures and charted that out for the next 3 years. However, the detail and bulk of that's going to be, we're going to present that at our next meeting as one of our items. But we've taken considerations at revenue trends and expenditure trends, and we'll give you an idea of what we think the budget's going to look like for the next 3 years.
Just the operations budget, or the entire budget?
So it's going to be the general fund, every single fund that's included, and it's going to be the whole budget, just like how we're presenting the operating fund today and all the other funds in a couple of weeks. The 3-year projection is going to have the general fund and all the other funds. So it's going to have everything.
So any of the projected capital improvements and all of that?
Yes, yes, sir. Yeah, but there's also a capital improvement, in the next couple of weeks, when we present the capital improvement projects, you'll see the fiscal year 24-28 capital improvement project. So that'll be a standalone presentation. In addition, it'll be folded into the 3-year projection.
Is the $1 million transfer from the general fund to the projects fund only for the next fiscal year, or does that money incorporate other projects that go beyond the 24 year? The 24 year end of next year? Or are you just moving that money because it's considered surplus to operations and we know that's where we need it?
Right,
And you're
right.
just putting it there. It's not tagged or tied to any specific capital improvement.
No, and neither is the one we'll propose at the next meeting for fiscal '23. That's the result of the audit being finalized and the surplus funds that came in fiscal '23. That contribution will be $1.2 million, which is included in these numbers in a proposed state until it's approved by council for consideration. Then in '24, we're proposing another $1 million, only that one we're putting in the budget as well. So those funds are not specifically earmarked. As we talked about, shovel-ready projects, those types of things, or city share, or whatever we need to fund, that's what those funds would be for.
But when you do any kind of movement of money from the general fund to the projects fund, it's recognized as an expense, so it looks like you're spending more.
Spending it.
Yeah.
Right.
That drives me nuts.
That's what it is. I know. When I did the emergency fund going up 300,000, that's the reason, is because it's part of the expenditures. And that's how we define the calculation. Unless we redefine it, that's how it's going to be going forward.
And when you talk about that emergency fund, that's separate from the $5 million, right? So there's really about $8 million that is completely unassigned to anything, right? I mean,
Well,
you
it's
look-
committed. but-
Uncommitted,
Yeah, but it's not restricted yet. It's not restricted by law or anything.
right,
That's a council decision to commit those funds, yeah.
okay.
Okay, any more questions for us? We will move on to then administrative, finance, and legal. And Peter.
Hello, everybody. I will be going over the city council and commission budget, admin, finance, and legal. If you can go to the next slide, please. Go back. As Nate had mentioned, our projected expenditures for 22-23 compared to our proposed budget for 23-24 is relatively flat. That's that 4% increase in expenditures. And then you can see here just a brief breakdown of the city council, administration, finance, legal, and then the other departments of the difference, the change, the delta, so to speak, from the 2023 projected budget and the 2024 proposed. Next slide, please. Digging in a little deeper, for the city council and commissions, relatively flat, but wages did go up, and this is primarily due to the stipend increase that the council may remember that was passed. And then also, historically, and I'll speak about this with the Natural Resources Commission, and they are in the audience to ask any detailed questions. We have an intern that is paid through the city funds, which is roughly $6,500 with benefits. But then we also have a second intern that does work through the NRC, an intern for them, that is paid through the Park District. So we get reimbursed through that. That second intern was included in the wages for the city council, so that's why there's also that increase there. But generally speaking, the 101 projected is or proposed is for the elected officials with the new stipend, the PZBA members, police and fire commissioners, the 2 interns, 1 reimbursed by the Park District, and then the digital communications technician position. For special events, we kept it flat. We are still funding $28,000 for the Rock the Runway event. Then we have $10,000 for the block party. We never, block party is always at 10,000 or less. The Park District is very good at maintaining their budget. And then we put in $5,000 for city-associated events. If by chance we had another event or did want to do something on the east side or something like that, we always want to make sure we have a little extra money. This money also went to previous events such as the mayor's breakfast and things like that that aren't, that we haven't had recently.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
The Rock the Runway, is that a fixed amount that we know we're going to spend, or is that variable? Because
It varies.
There's a variability to it because it also is contingent on sponsorships as well.
Because the last projection I think I had seen was we were estimating it to be almost $40,000.
I believe our last history was 28,000 we spent last year. Now, certainly, if you incorporate the costs of public works and police, it's 40,000 or above. Well, overtime costs are considerable.
And is that factored into the?
No, this is solely an out-of-pocket cost.
So maybe the 37,000 included overtime.
It would probably be well over that.
Would
But
that have
it's
been-
bounced generally around 25,000, 28,000, so that's why we did.
2021 was 28,000. It said 2022, $37,000 estimated. So I just was curious. That's fine. Thanks.
Okay, and then Natural Resources Commission, they are in the audience, so if you want to have any detailed question, but let me just go over it really quick. They are asking for $13,544. This includes the $6,500 for their intern, and in comparison to last year, it is roughly a $1,000 increase. If you have any direct questions, or if the NRC would like to say anything.
Glad to answer any questions.
Okay.
So the $1,000 increase is because of the increased need for hourly rates for the interns?
The increase comes from the withholding that we have to add for the intern positions.
Okay.
And then we had also, an increase for herbicides.
For herbicides?
Herbicides, yeah. This year we have, we're focusing solely on maintenance of all the sites. And there's a lot of work to do that involves the use of herbicides, so that number is going to go up. That's basically it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and then also under the City Council and Commission's budget is the audio-visual department, and I know Rich Tibbetts is on the line. Treasurer Tibbetts, do you have anything to say? Waiting for Rich. He is asking for $28,650, roughly $1,000 more than last year.
Right. I just got on, I just got myself unmuted. Really, the crux of the matter has to do with a couple of computers that are old and slow that need to be replaced. We discovered that even though we have battery backup in the production room, playout room, the outlets themselves are not connected to the backup generator that serves the entire building. And so I just really estimated at what the electrical cost would be for an electrician to diagnose that and connect it to get those outlets, connected to the generator so that we have even more backup available for the playout system and so forth, and the recording system, of course. And then the other big number has to do with converting the connection to Comcast from coax to a fiber optic, and they've gone back and forth with estimates of what this would cost. So I just estimated this really high, and with the expectation that Shouldn't come in anywhere close to that, but you never know. I still would like, we all would like that to happen because it costs Comcast quite a bit of money to maintain those coax cables every time they get damaged by a storm or go out for old age reasons. There's amplifiers along the way that have problems, and so that costs them money. Fiber optic wouldn't be as susceptible to that type of problem, and also would work a lot better. And it's the wave of the future, basically. So I'm urged. I've had that really as a back burner to the budget for quite some time. Last year, I think we talked about building a server for the AV department, which we did, and it's working fabulously for us. And so hopefully we'll get to this fiber optic issue this next fiscal year and hopefully resolve that as well. So that's all I have for AV at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Rich. That leaves us with the Departments of Administration, Finance, and Legal. For administration, staffing levels remain the same. There was a slight decrease in the administration's budget. I'd like to say that Joe and I are cutting costs, but there's not too much we can cut. So IMRF came to the rescue and drastically reduced the employer contribution. So that, unfortunately, is the reason for any reductions in administration. Finance, pretty static, along with legal. Legal, there's a slight bump, but that is because we are we're about to head into negotiations with Local 150. That's our public works union. So we do contract out with a labor attorney that we have had a great relationship with and has helped the city immensely. So we will. That's the reason for the bump for that. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to field them. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Going to give you an update and a summary of the building and zoning development fees. Last year, we budgeted very conservatively. We had instability in the financial markets, supply chain markets. People didn't understand if they were even going to be able to get material. We heard Mr. Rogauskas tonight saying they're at 13 to 16-week lead times, and that was the message we were getting when we budgeted last year. However, during the course of the year, we saw a stabilization in supply costs, material costs, an opening up of all of the industries, and we experienced a very, very good year under the building permits and zoning fees. We also had one major zoning application that contributed a large percentage to that. That didn't materialize, but that helped the revenues. And at the end of the day, we had a conservative budget for 23 of a little over 400, almost 441,000, and we are projecting to come in just under 518,000. So we had approximately 130,000, or a budget increase of about 78,000, and with other fees about 130,000 increase for the year. So that was a substantial side. On the, if you could go back a slide, please. Thank you. The big thing with the expenditures is due to the fact that the Allstate Dermody project did not go through, and the Lexington project was on hold, and we got full reimbursement from Dermody for all those costs. We were projecting to come in with about a $14,000 under budget this year on our expenditures, which is, I'm very happy to say we did a good job controlling costs this year. So that, on the next page, another part of the big reasons for the revenue increases was the 3 restaurant reconstruction projects. We had a couple new single-family homes. The Home Bar released the venue space, and the owner of the mall converted that to new commercial space. And I want to give credit to my admin assistant, Jen Mizia. She recommended and performed an audit of all our major rental properties, and we discovered approximately 75 additional units that were not being licensed in our program, so that it was a good catch on her part to try and get a better handle. Every year it gets better. It's improved significantly since the 2018 when the fire at River Trails, and even got better after this year's misfortune over at Willow Heights. If we want to go into the next slide, please. This year, we're already seeing a significant uptick in building permit applications this year. And in talking to the builders and developers, there's a lot of work already in the pipeline. Based on that and a couple of potential projects I see coming forward in terms of new houses, tear downs and significant rebuilds, I'm projecting an increase in revenue this year. The reasons are there. Next slide, please. Expenditures. I'm projecting a decrease from the fiscal 23 budget. The main side of that is we're not going to be expending money on the large projects that we had coming forward. My budget doesn't take into account for next year the zoning code update. It does take into account slight increases in all the contracts for professional services that we realized, and yet we're going to be coming in at a very modest decrease of about $14,000 compared to last year. So at the end of the day, we're not taking into consideration the Prospect Point Mirror Park development. It's still on the books. The parties are still in negotiations. And if that project does go through, it will have some impacts on the budget, but I'm not going to plan for them. If we get the project, there may be some additional revenues that will come in, and there may be some minor expenses, but I've built in a little bit of cushion in the professional services budget to accommodate that. That being said, we're looking to come in about 17% higher in revenues and about 2.3% less in expenses. Any questions? I'll be more than happy to answer. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Dan.
Waiting for him to say go. Sorry?
Go ahead, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, staff. Public Works budget, we're on the, can you go to the first slide for me, or the second slide? Thank you. We present a pretty fixed, stable budget for this year. It's very similar to past years, frugal but realistic. The real expensive stuff we're going to cover at the next meeting. Our capital plan, Joe had mentioned, the sidewalks, the road projects, the drainage issues, and then additional engineering added projects. At that time, we'll cover the water department, the sewer, Metra, SSAs. Today is just about the Public Works base budget. We talk about initiatives and projects. Every year, we talk about things that we can do and we want to do. But this year, I'm a little more cautious about talking out too many shiny things to fixate on, because it may be at the expense of stuff we're already doing. Everything we touch has an expected service level. Try to improve that every year. We try to be more efficient and get more done. And every year it adds a little bit more onto the workload. And if you think about it, what we do with 6 guys is sometimes hard to understand. it's continually juggling of planned work, scheduled work, and demand issues. And yes, that's the seed for next year, talking about additional staffing or admin assistance, things like that. I got to toss that in there. This year's one of our initiatives, though. We're really trying, we've already started on it, even though we'll talk about next fiscal year. We're talking about 2023 here and 2024. Is we're doing a segmented stormwater mapping project. We know about a lot of our big issues. We have our hit list of stuff we look at before and after. But this year, what we're working on is taking smaller areas that have problems that have been unaddressed, that there may be simple fixes to. Our GIS database has become very robust over the last few years. The majority of our freshwater systems, sanitary lines, are very well documented now. But our stormwater system still has many blank areas. And we work with projects and contractors and things, and they want to know where a pipe is, and we tell them it's UTS, under there somewhere. It's an old term we used to use about locating utilities, but it's still true to this day. There's a lot of areas that we have documented guesstimates on where a pipe goes or what it does. Some of the stuff we'll never fix. It's old farm tile. But there's spots out there that we need to know what's in the ground. When we have contractors or developers looking at something and we give them we have no clue answer, it really doesn't help us. And if there's things that we can do to help out our stormwater situation, having the best records and ability to do that is what we're looking for. So this project we're trying to get done this year is breaking the city up into little pieces. Instead of saying we're going to go fix everything on the east side or the west side or the north, this is what we call back pocket work. It's a project that'll get us somewhere. It'll get us a lot more detail on these areas that we're missing. One of our initiatives we're working on, we talked about it last year. Our original salt box storage, built in the 80s. The roof came off a couple years ago. We went through the last couple years without having a roof on it. It's in our budget for improvements at Public Works. It's where we keep dry material. Well, not the last couple years. It's been getting wet. When we do restorals in the summertime, we bring in dirt. We like to put it there. It can stay dry if we get a heavy rain. Overflow salt when we have deliveries. And it helps when we have wet stuff to get in there and we can put it underneath cover and it dries out. So it's just a small part of the budget, but it's a thing that we've been passing on, and it was a shiny object last year and we missed it. We have also on the budget for this year is the extended parkway tree removal replacement. We've gone a little light on tree removal the last few years, budget-wise, COVID, things like that. We're an established community. We don't have the typical sidewalk, parkway delineation like many neighborhoods have. So in that case, we have a lot of trees that are massive because there was no 10-foot parkway or anything like that. Every time we have a big storm, we have residents upset that big limbs have come out of trees that have been there for 60 years that were large when they moved in the 70s. So we're going to be addressing those more this year. We are part of Tree City USA. Our arborist does a great job keeping up on all the information, all the text, all the objectives that we need to reach. The last couple of years, we were a little light on our tree removals and replacements. So that's one of our things on the budget and our focus this year. Something you'll notice this year is even right here at City Hall, we're going to do some curb replacement, stormwater structures that are sinking down and reseal coating, repaving the parking lot here to make it safer and not worn. So those are some of the basic stuff. I never had you move slides forward. I'm sorry about that. Current workforce, we're sticking with where we're at. No change at this point. All the duties that we cover. And it was mentioned earlier that this year is a contract renegotiation for our Public Works members. We have 6 guys, again, like I had said. Our most senior fellow has been here 29 years. It goes down to 23, 19, 15, and then our last 2 guys are both just underneath a year. So we have a pretty established workforce in the senior end. and they're bringing our new guys up to speed. So, any questions? That's all I really have for tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mark? Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next, Police Chief.
Good evening, everybody. It's my first budget. Probably a little bit more difficult for me this year, but next year it should go a little smoother. The first slide you'll see, it's our new graphic design. If you remember our old graphic design, we still have a few of them are black and gold, which is more like Cook County Police. So we believe, in fact, a lot of other law enforcement agencies also believe we have probably the best patch around, and we are proudly showing that on each one of our squads there. Next slide. Let's start with some accomplishments. Myself and Deputy Chief Nerman, we've done an awful lot in 10 months, and we've hired a new social worker, the first social worker that works specifically for Prospect Heights. We hired a records manager. Our records division is literally now in the 21st century. We're saving a lot of paper. We're saving a lot of time. Court jackets. The officers are prepared to bring documents to court. We hired an administrative assistant. She's helping tremendous. She's doing whatever she can, not just administratively, but she pitches in wherever she needs to pitch in. Volunteering, she handles adjudication. She literally will do whatever we ask of her. We've hired 3 full-time police officers. There's a lot that goes into hiring a police officer. There are multiple interviews. There's scheduling polygraphs and psychological tests, and there's training them firearms. There's taser training that we do here. There's pepper spray that we do here. And unfortunately, we had 3 officers. The reason it says 3 is we had 3 and we had to let 3 go, because we are not just hiring a body. We want an officer who's going to make the city proud, the police department proud, competent. So unfortunately, over the last 10 months, 3 of them didn't work out. And so when that happens, if you notice in the 22-23 budget, our clothing allowance is way over budget. And that's because every time we have an officer and we have to clothe them and give them all the equipment, that's about $2,000. Every time they go do a psychological, that's $700. Polygraph is another $170. So we have to, that doesn't even come to my mind. Oh, it's, if this guy's not working out, how much are we going to spend for another one? No, we want a good body. We want a good officer who can retire here. So that's unfortunate. I say we hire 3. Not as a bragging, but it's unfortunate that we had to go through 3, but we have the best of the best now, so that's good. We did hire a part-time officer. One of our part-timers moved right into full-time. He's working out really, really well. Our printer, we found, and we've had the printer for 2 months. It's tremendous. $10,000 a year savings. That's what a bonus. We replaced Xtivity, the previous company that was doing our maintenance for our exterior cameras and a few of the cameras inside the train station and City Hall. When asked them for some statements as to what they were doing and how they were doing it, they could not provide anything. They were just, and to be quite honest with you, Mark Roscoe was probably doing most of the work, and I'm sure he would tell you about that. So we fired them.
I'll take it for 10 grand, thanks.
We fired them at a savings of at least $10,000 a year. $100,000 over 5 years. We originally had an agreement with Motorola for squad car cameras. I just want to tell you that we are mandated to have body-worn cameras come January 1, 2025. And had we kept these, there'd be a 1.5 to 2 years where we'd have both, body-worn cameras and squad car cameras. It'd be great to have both, but as everyone knows who's sitting here, we can't afford both. And we're not an agency that is getting complaint after complaint, human rights violations, beating people up, and things like that. If we were, we'd have them. But we are very fortunate that we don't have those complaints. We've updated all of our Prospect Heights policies. We've asked our sergeants to look at them over many, many years. Some of them are very outdated, and some of them we weren't following because it's just, they're outdated. So we're up to date on that. For the first time ever, well, because a couple years ago, the state mandated that we expunge a lot of cannabis records since that is no longer a crime, a certain amount of weight, and the juvenile records. And the records, and Shayna, our administrator, worked very hard and diligently to get that done. So if we were audited, we're good, and we haven't been for the last 2 years. And thanks to Sergeant Buffont, who's worked very hard, and Deputy Chief Derman, as you know, Sergeant Buffont is part of our NIPUS team, and with that, he gets a lot of training. And with that training, part of the Safety Act, most of the training officers were able to go online, and part of training is you go through a course, and you know how online training is. Are we paying attention, or are we just good test takers and you fast forward? Because I've done it. You fast forward and you get to the questions, and you know, if you've got a half a brain, you can pass that. So I like the idea of mandated. This training is 10 hours a year for each and every officer, part-time as well, chiefs and deputy chiefs as well. Now, if you can imagine, I underestimated, to be quite honest with you, what $5,000 a year, paying an officer overtime 10 hours a year for the rest of his career, times 23 of us, that's a lot of money. Deputy Chief Derman and Sergeant Buffont are doing this on guys' days off or while they're working, giving them an extra day off. So it's literally, we're just paying Sergeant Buffont the overtime and not the other guys. Some of the part-times, perhaps. I am hosting, because I feel this is such a great thing, next Monday, or this coming Monday, I put it out there for all the chiefs. I said, hey, I have 2 guys that are trained up, and when this first came out, you should have seen the chiefs' looks, because like, how are we going to do this? Because the Illinois Training Board said you must do this, but they didn't give you any guidance on how to do it. And there's no state funding for it. So let me tell you something, Prospect Heights, I still have my hair because we're going to get this training from our 2 guys. What a relief that is for me. I hope you understand how great we are because of that. I've got about 30 people coming Monday. I've got to find parking for them because they want to know, how are you doing this? And so I have somebody from NEMERT, which is, they certify instructors, and somebody from the state coming out with many chiefs, sergeants, lieutenants, commanders. So on Monday, when you see a ton of cars, we're going to be downstairs from 10 a.m. to noon, like a town hall meeting. I'm going to let them know this is how we did it. And so they are very interested. Next slide. Our staffing, we do have 27 police officers, 23 full-time, 4 part-time, and 9 administrative staff. And for the first time in 3 years, patrol is 100%, meaning we're not short any, and it's very hard to get a competent officer these days. We do have a patrol sergeant who's been on light duty, and he is preparing to medical out. Got good news. He has been notified for the first time in 10 months for a doctor's appointment. So that's good. Thank you, sir. We anticipate him being gone within the next 6 months. We are still in need of 2 part-time officers, but I also wrote on here that we need 2 part-time desk officers. We have them hired. So in the last 5 days, we've hired 2 desk officers, so we have the weekends covered, which is a big benefit because, again, last year, the budget was a little bit over because our full-time desk officers were covering the weekends at times when we had a prisoner because we had nobody. So we're covered on that. Goals for this coming fiscal year is to maintain a good quality service, employee retention and recruitment, We upgrade our software and desktop computers. We are getting 8 new desktop computers. It's in the budget this year. Maintain training qualifications to meet the Safety Act and maintain a high level of morale and to support officer wellness and mental health. We have a free training program for that as well, that the guys spend an hour or two each year for that. Revenue and expenditures proposed for this coming fiscal year is $489. I'll get more into that on the next slide. Compared to budgeted 22-23 revenue, it's up 33%. Public safety expenditures proposed for this fiscal year is $5,590,022. And on the next page, we'll get more into that. Traffic fines of $275. That decreased mainly because for the first, I think, 6 months of last fiscal year, due to construction, our red light cameras were down. They just were not, they took them down. Drivers knew that. The signs were down. And so because of that, we're going to see a decrease as they start to go through and they see that the red light camera is actually working, taking pictures. Because you really can't find eastbound Palatine frontage at Milwaukee by accident. So as more drivers learn that the cameras are back up and working, we're expecting quite a bit less revenue. Ordinance and parking fines, slight increase from last year, mainly from the DACRA system. We don't have full service DACRA yet, but the efficiency of how the letters are distributed and the fact that we're now doing, we're having hearings once a month, it holds people more accountable. Administrative tolls increase. Since COVID, we've obviously had a lot more traffic. More traffic becomes more people driving without a license and without insurance, and we administratively tow their vehicles. And alarm license fees are consistent with prior years. Alternative funding sources. We do have 2 grants that we've applied for. One's from the Justice Assistance Grant, federal grant, and then there's one from the Illinois Law Enforcement Training Standards Board. We are trying to, it's a 50% grant. And since body-worn cameras will be mandated January 1, 2025, we may have to start earlier, but at a 50% discount even for 1 year. We're going to try to do that. We'll be ready for that. We already have the policies written, and I'm hoping between both of them, we can get one of them. We also have, it's been ongoing, the Bureau of Justice Assistance. We will use every dollar of it because they reimburse you half, and vests are going for $880, and they do give us half of that each year, up to 4 vests, and we will use that. Alternative funding sources, DA task force. I spoke to Deputy Chief Derman, who was our task force person there for many, many years. He does have outstanding monies coming in. It's just between COVID and they found the glitch of, as far as administratively on not our end, but someone else's end, that these monies should start coming in. But again, it's hard to forecast. How do you know? I mean, Detective O'Connor is the DA task force person now, and he said it's just been slow. COVID was part of it. It's starting to pick up now, but it's hard to forecast. Typically, it's been a good source, and we're anticipating a big uptick in those revenues for this year. With those DEA funds, we have been, I think, for 3 years now, we are using that money for squad car purchases. 2 last year, 1 this year. Prior to that, the squad cars were being purchased from the general fund. Total expenditures, 5.590. That's an increase of $232,592 from 22-23 budget. Mainly, there's several reasons. Fuel costs, $8,000. Health insurance, $57,000. Professional services, $21,000. That's part of what I was telling you about clothing, the fees for the poly, fees for the psychological exam. These are partly the reason why professional services went up as they did. A workman's comp, $11,000. Tuition reimbursement, $5,500. That's all our social worker. She is going for her master's degree in social services, so that's going to benefit everybody, including the residents. And I think Bob is going to talk about the pension.
Thank you, Chief. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Questions for Bill or no?
Oh, any questions about the budget for this year or last year's?
All right, thanks, Bill. I think we discussed a lot of this earlier in the council meeting regarding the pension fund contribution. On this chart here, as you can see, I think we did this last year also, is to compare Prospect Heights to other surrounding towns, other communities surrounding Prospect Heights, and where Prospect Heights stands as in being funded. And currently, we're at 72% funded, which puts us maybe in a little bit of a mid-range with some of the towns like Wheeling, Buffalo Grove, Palatine, Rolling Meadows. Even with our smaller population size and smaller police force than those cities around us, we're still able to maintain that 72% funding level. If you notice from fiscal year 21 to 22, the city, we had a spike of 12 percentage points, which is the city contributing. If you look beyond, go to the next slide real quick. The next slide. You notice around that time frame, the city had put in about 110% of the recommended contribution, which contributed to that increase between 21 and 22. Yeah, you can stay there. So, like we discussed earlier, said that each year the city's contribution to the police pension is made up of three components. We talked about the annual tax levy, contribution from the general fund, and then the budgeted employee contributions. And going down to the chart down there, we're asking for, or recommending an annual contribution of 1.29, which has those three components. The tax levy of $450,000, a general fund contribution of $600,000, and then you have the employee contribution of $240,000. With that amount, you're looking at about paying about 89% of the recommended contribution from the actuary or from the pension fund. The recommendation is also be 170% above the state required contribution. So at this, we were looking for, or not, I should say we're looking for, but recommending is 1.29 to fund the city's pension fund.
So I have a question. So if you reduce that to the same level as the contribution in 23, which was 975,000, could you give us the calculations on that with a contribution of 975 or $1 million? We'd like to look at the difference in the percentages so we can consider it properly.
We could do that, yes. And I believe if you look at what the recommended is 443, and then 23 is 1.453, I think you're probably be around the range of between about 67, about the same number, about 67%.
Okay. But you said you can do it for us so we could have it.
Yeah.
That'd be great, because the required contribution is 760. I understand, the concern, but it's most likely going to be extended, and I feel like that's just a really high contribution. I understand where you're coming from, though, I do.
Right. And, with the whole new state consolidation, when the state took over the pension funds and put in the consolidation, they have an actuarial firm now that decides how to, decides the actuarial number that they're going to use. It used to be the Department of Insurance. And now that it was called IPEF, I think it's called, the Illinois Police Officers Pension Investment Fund, they hired an actuarial firm to come up with the number that's required, minimum number. And then the pension fund has a actuarial firm also that comes up with their number. And then between the two, the city has in the past fall in that, between that range of what the state's recommended and what the pension fund has recommended.
Right, but last year they recommended 747, 299 for the state required, and the actuary required was 1,453,064, and we contributed 975, not 1.2.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to see it just adjusted down to, you know, I don't know that we need to put in that much. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Joe, what do you think?
Well, it is kind of a pay now or pay later
No, I
dilemma.
know, right.
Part of it, my understanding, and I think that there were efforts, certainly by the Northwest Municipal Conference and the
Right.
Illinois Municipal League, there was a spike that came with consolidation. And part of that also was because many of the Tier 2 benefits were discontinued.
Right.
So just statewide, everybody that was paying in was recognized to have a spike, and it's going to be for a few years.
Right.
So then the counter that the municipalities went to is, can you give us some relief? Can you amortize this on a longer schedule?
Right, exactly.
And we've been working on that, we municipalities,
Right.
I think for about 3 years, and have gotten nowhere. So we were kind of hoping that there'd be some relief, which would have reduced the annual pension costs and smoothed that over. So I don't have an answer for you, other than it's either pay now or pay later, because I don't see legislative relief coming to the amortization schedule.
Not for right now. Especially, there's a few, what I've heard is a few pension funds out there that have, are suing the state over the consolidation, that they had no part, you know, they had no right to take over the pension fund. So that's another monkey wrench they're throwing in there, and the state has to defend that lawsuit, which is going to probably come out of these pension funds that are already in there. So, and Joe's right, it's, you know, it's pay now or pay later, but again, it's our recommendation, and it's going to be really based on what the city council here is comfortable with doing.
It's a great discussion point, because also too, there will be years that we will not be into a position to contribute as much, but we'll be closer to that required amount. So it's kind of like, we've gone up. I think when I started, we were maybe about 55%, which wasn't good, and we moved up. But we moved up because we've been paying more, so it's.
Yeah, if we want to go back to
Yeah.
that part.
I mean, maybe we could discuss this, you know, at a later time.
Sure.
Maybe, I mean, before the next session, but just in more detail and try to see what we can do with it. Okay.
It's a good discussion item. It's probably one of the key, well, I think really the budget is kind of balanced on this question, really, so.
Just a quick
Thank you.
A quick comment on that. I agree with Alderman Morgan Adams about not wanting to fund it, because we saw what happened with, I believe it was the CARES Act. It might have been one of the other 25 acts that came across in the last 3 years related to COVID, where one day, because of COVID, all these pensions got funded and made resolvent. You know, Central States got refunded. That was supposed to go bankrupt in 5 years. Now it's out there forever until, you know, for it to continue on. So, you know, pension plan that I am a part of or work for has always done the right thing. 140%, 135% funded, and it's, you know, it's a sock in the gut when you see the funds that weren't run right getting this money for free. You know, there's strings attached, but still, you know, there might be something to be said about keeping it at a certain level. You know, I think we were at 70, what were we at, 72% funded?
72%.
Which is still, you know.
Really good.
Well,
Very good.
in my world, it's not really good, but I mean, I guess it's good for police pensions, but I agree, we need to watch this, because if something changes and we put all this money into it, that sometime down the road, they're gonna make it right. I don't know what really happened by the state taking over these pensions, because I've been here 20 years, we've been saying the same things about what we're supposed to put in, what the actuary says, what the state required contribution is. So has anything really changed by the state taking this over?
I don't see anything change. I was on my prior life, I was on a pension board for a police department. And it was, it's basically privately run. When you bring your own wealth management companies in to manage the money. The state, we never got a real reason why the state wanted it. All we kept on here is that the smaller communities were having a hard time funding their pension funds. But again, I think those communities didn't put in the proper amount at the time they were supposed to, because they had other obligations that they were probably paying for. And then they run into an issue not being funded by a certain level or by a certain time.
Does the state hold the money now? Do they have one investment fund that
Yes.
handles all the money?
And
So we have nothing to do with that anymore?
It's now a little bit like the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, in that there's a centralized system.
Right.
And it doesn't have, one of the selling points to it was that each town, there's considerable management expense. Each town, if you had police and fire, you'd have 2 actuaries, you'd have
there's two separate.
all of those things, overhead costs. And the other part is, as Mr. Drysdale mentioned, you'd have ability now, if you were a smaller entity, to get into some stronger investment opportunities.
The smaller pension funds weren't able to invest in the stock market at only a certain percentage based on how much they had in their pension fund. So this was, their thing was to give them an opportunity now to reap more money because they're in a bigger fund and they will invest in more things. The pension, the consolidation, everybody has a chunk of the whole Prospect Heights is one chunk of this major consolidation. So Prospect Heights does get a report of, here's what you put in, here's how you're doing, type of thing. So they were supposed to run it like, whatever we heard in the beginning of it, like IMRF, get it to that level where IMRF is at. But I don't think my opinion is I don't believe they can get it to that level, because that means they would have to ask the cities to put in require more contribution than what the actuary is saying to get them to that certain level. And what's not helping right now is the market is tanking, which is, been pretty quiet too on the consolidation front. We haven't heard much over the last year. And again, there's probably 10 or 15, maybe 10 funds that are in the process of suing the state. That they're still working with their own private wealth management company right now, so.
And it might take more time for us to get some history as to this performance. I think it's still kind of in that developmental stages as far as evaluation.
Because about 12 years ago, we were worried because we still had 90% of our original officers, and we're like, wow, well, there's going to be this cliff that we're going to fall over, because at that time, I think we're probably 50 or 60% funded. And never happened. It was like the Y2K thing. It didn't happen. Now we got people spread out a little more. Our average years of service is far less than what it was 10 years ago. Obviously, our percent of fundedness is going up. But I do agree there's a balance to it. I don't think we're over it yet. I don't think we're going crazy with it yet, but it's something I think, we don't want to be in Arlington Heights' shoes at 93% with all that money sitting there, because there's really no risk to this not getting paid. We have to pay it no matter what, whether it's now or later. But I do agree we should watch it and not put too much in, but I don't think we're that far off from what we should be putting in.
Well, maybe we could talk about it a little more, see what we could crunch the numbers.
If you look up on the slide here, you have the history of our contribution level, which has grown, I think Joe mentioned in the 50s back in 17. So pretty strong contributions over the years in
Right.
terms of a city that's as small as our unfunded liability of 8 million compared to all these neighboring communities. So that's a pretty strong contribution rate over this time. And it's a fast growth rate too to get from 57 to 72.
So we jumped from a 57% contribution all the way up to a 72% contribution.
Funding level,
Yeah, funding
57%
level, right.
funding level. Yep, from 17 to 22.
But that's also a reflection of the composition of the department.
Right.
So, I mean,
Yes.
back at the time when it was 57, I think it was even lower than that at one point, is because we had a lot of senior officers that were gonna be going out, and we knew that was coming quick. Now,
Right.
we have
That's
younger
true.
people, and it's not younger necessarily, but just less years of service is affecting the funded level, because we have a longer time horizon, so.
True.
There's a lot of factors in it, but I think we're pretty good right now.
And I think at least hearing from the Northwest Council or the Illinois Municipal League, much of the big spike we're seeing now is attributed to the elimination of Tier 2 benefits. And I think realistically, when that was established, I think most people recognize that sometime that is going to end. It's like United Airlines used to have 2 pilots that could be sitting next to each other, and if they were a day off from when they were hired, they had different pension benefits than others. Those things don't usually last too long. So it was, and now because of the inclusion of that, there's a spike. The cities are working to smooth that over a longer period of time of amortization, but we haven't seen any relief from that, and it ends up being a pay now or pay later question.
No, I get it, I mean, but, yeah, I know, I heard you.
IMRF kept their 2 tiers, so I mean, they still have the 2-tier system, so that's, there's some benefit, everybody loves IMRF.
Not as strong of a lobbying influence in Springfield.
Yeah, I guess.
I would suspect that
That's
might
true.
be the.
I agree.
yeah.
Statutes of administrators.
Right.
All right, any other questions or comments on this?
So we'll put together something for the council for
Okay.
next
Thank
time,
you. Appreciate it.
or before the next meeting, if you
Okay.
take a look at it, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? I believe that completes our budget presentations. Anything else, Joe?
No, we thank you for your interest and
Good job.
patience.
Yeah, and thank you, everyone who helped to put all of these together. I know it's a lot of work for each department, so we do appreciate it. I believe that then brings us to the approval of warrants. Madam Clerk?
Yes, our total for expenditures, we have a total of $329,313.41. We then had wire payments on February 24th, 2023 payroll. It amounted to $170,717.32. And a February Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund amounted to $17,433.36, bringing the total warrant amount to $517,464.09 for council's approval.
Could I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved, Morgan Adams.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions? There being none, could I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Morgan Adams,
Aye.
Alderman Dolick,
Aye.
Alderman Ludvixson,
Aye.
Alderman Dash,
Aye.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. That brings us to public comments on non-agenda matters. Has anyone registered or?
I have a couple of things I didn't register. Only a couple of minutes, if you would, please.
Certainly. I assume no one else has registered?
No, no one else has.
Thank you. Go ahead and step to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Richard Hayman, 822 East Old Willow Road. First thing, hello, council, everybody, thank you. First thing I'd like to mention is that I'm looking for some volunteers to help clean up along the levee wall, along Milwaukee and River Road. Levee 37 wall, both sides. There's a lot of trash, graffiti, etc. So a lot of this is done through the Prairie State Canoe Club, who has a lot of cleanup projects along the rivers. Since we have the river there, we should be working along with the Prairie State Canoe Club and their cleanup projects to help that happen. So I need some volunteers for this. If you're interested, please contact me at firstwordph.com. Second item is in regards to Special Service Area 5, I'll be holding a tournament, a pool tournament. I'm like a semi-pro pool player, so I know a lot of pool players. I'm holding a community pool tournament at Rockies on the 2nd of April. 50% of the proceeds will go to as a grant to Special Service Area 5. I'm adding $1,000 to that tournament. I think George is too, or he's adding something anyway. In regards to that, a couple of years ago, I had a fairly bad car accident. That caused me 2 spinal surgeries in my neck. It's been a long process of recovery, but my settlement should be significant. So in that regard, since I will have more than enough, I've decided to pledge $25,000 of that settlement to Special Service Area 5 for projects to take care of that community. And the last thing I'd like to mention is, as far as events on the east side go, I haven't seen a whole lot going on the east side in the last 12 years. Years ago, we had a couple of successful Taste of Prospect Heights events, mostly held and sponsored by Rockies, worked through Rocky, George Sellis at Rocky Vanders. George loves that idea, and we'd like to see that happen again. So I would be hoping for something somewhere around the 4th of July in that Milwaukee Plaza. That would also include all of the businesses in Ward 1, along with the 5 hotels in Ward 1. And I think if we get that group together, along with the Mayor Dolick and the Milwaukee businesses in Milwaukee Plaza, we can have a pretty good get-together and have a good community event. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. We have no executive session this evening, and so that brings us to adjournment. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. Have a great evening.